Welcome to the Electric Wire Podcast. We bring you news and views on the most pressing issues facing Wisconsin's electric industry, from policymakers, executives, and customer and environmental advocates. Bringing you these discussions, we are the Customers First Coalition. Here's your host, Executive Director Kristen Jilks.
Welcome to the 50th episode of the Electric Wire Podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Jilks, and we are delighted to share with you audio from the Power Breakfast that CFC hosted this year in August. Our event this year brought back some favorite speakers from the Electric Wire Podcast over the course of our 49 episodes. Our speakers included opening remarks by Commissioner Marcus Hawkins of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. Laurel Peltier, a journalist and energy advocate from Maryland, presented about the reality of retail choice in Maryland. Brent, president and CEO of Dairyland Power Cooperative, gave us more information and insight into where Dairyland is at on pumped hydro storage, SMRs, and all in the context of how to keep providing affordable and reliable power. We also featured an energy providers panel to help our listeners understand more about the different energy providers providing service across Wisconsin. To close things out, we were joined by Representative Lisa Subek, who is the ranking member on the Assembly Energy and Utilities Committee. Lisa represents Madison in the State Assembly, and it was an honor to have her join us to provide closing remarks. I want to mention the sponsors of the Power Breakfast this year. Coming in with our energy density sponsorship was Frederickson and Byron Law Firm. All the power sponsors were ATC, Stafford Rosenbaum LLP, the Wisconsin Counties Association, the Wisconsin Utilities Association, and WEC Energy Group. Our baseload energy sponsors were Focus on Energy, Boardman Clark, Michael Best, Envision by Amplify Health, the Natural Resource Development Association, TC Energy, and Xcel Energy sponsored as well. Thank you again to all of our sponsors and the members of the Customers First Coalition for your ongoing support. I also want to give a very, very special thank you to Wisconsin Eye, who recorded and archived the entire Power Breakfast. You can find that on wiseye.org. If you register for a free account with Wiseye, you're actually able to download events and view archived footage. It's a great service that they are providing for Wisconsin. So thank you so much to Wisconsin Eye. I also want to thank Anne-Marie Adams, who served as the event MC. You'll hear Anne-Marie occasionally introducing speakers as you listen to this event. And Anne-Marie is actually the voice you heard right before mine, introducing me as you begin listening to the Electric Wire Podcast. So it was so fun to have her MC the event with us. Right now, though, we are going to cut into the event right as Commissioner Marcus Hawkins begins speaking. Some of you may remember Marcus first appeared on episode 39 of the Electric Wire back when he was the executive director of the Organization of MISO States. Marcus was appointed in March of this year as a commissioner on the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin by Governor Tony Evers. And I will turn you over now to Marcus Hawkins' opening remarks, and the rest of the agenda will follow.
You're watching Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting Wiseye to 44321.
Thank you, and I did not know about Christy's episode, so I'm going to have to go back into the archives and watch that. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here at the Customers First Coalition 2024 Power Breakfast. I just want to observe that power and breakfast are two of my favorite things, and so when Kristen reached out, a little closer, when Kristen reached out, it was really a no-brainer that I could come today and help kick things off for this exciting celebration. So, as mentioned, my name is Marcus Hawkins, and I serve on the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. I'm very excited to be here today to help welcome you to this awesome event and help celebrate the 50th episode of the Electric Wire podcast. Last year, during this very event, I was just in the back. I was here to geek out about nuclear energy, and so I'm even more excited to be part of the show today and up here on stage. As someone who used to dabble in nuclear engineering, I jump at every rare but growing opportunity to come to an event in Wisconsin where nuclear energy is on the agenda, so I'm really looking forward to later on in today's program to hear more about nuclear energy. As mentioned, there's an incredible lineup of speakers today who have been featured on past episodes of the pod, and I look forward to hearing from all of them again. Before I go any further, though, I want to acknowledge the Customers First Coalition Executive Director, Kristen Jilks, for her work in organizing this event and hosting an excellent podcast. So thank you, Kristen. And I really want to underscore what Anne-Marie was sort of alluding to with the success of the podcast. For the last almost 5 years, Kristen and the coalition have created a platform to highlight really important developments in the energy and utilities industry. Her discussion with industry leaders and experts have examined recent key achievements as well as pretty big challenges. And through this time, the coalition has worked to advance understanding and serve as a valuable platform for digging in on things like electric vehicles, battery storage, nuclear power, and energy efficiency. So it's just a really, really great platform along with events like this to help move conversations forward. As mentioned, I myself have been very fortunate to contribute to these discussions as a prior guest on the pod. I personally really loved this opportunity to blab with Kristen about the power grid for probably a little north of an hour or so. And that was in my prior role when I was leading the organization of MISO states. I'll get into that a little bit more in just a bit, but I first want to really personally thank Kristen for that opportunity, because after that episode was wrapped, I was able to send that link off to my mother and let her watch that episode and help demystify what the heck it is I'm doing with my life. So that's a gift that keeps on giving. It's been forwarded amongst my family members, and so really invaluable. So Kristen, I'm indebted forever. Anyhow, I was somewhere in this. I wanted to elaborate a bit more on my a big piece of my background, which, as I mentioned, was leading the organization of MISO states. And I think it serves as a great example for why coalitions such as this one are so vitally important in this industry. So prior to my appointment on the commission in April, I served as the executive director of the OMS, Organization of MISO States, and that's essentially just a coalition of state regulators in a 15-state region. You throw in the province of Manitoba and the city of New Orleans for good measure, and you end up with a 17-member coalition of utility regulators spread across the country from Manitoba down to Mississippi. As you can imagine, everyone gets along perfectly and agrees on things like clean energy policies and how to pay for transmission, no fighting whatsoever. Of course, I'm kidding. There's tons of disagreements, but it made all of our work that much better by challenging each other's thinking. Now, the history of OMS was it was formed at a time of uncertainty and rapid change in the utility industry. Apparently, we haven't fixed that, but at this time, back in 2003, the electric industry was experiencing a major regulatory shakeup, and there was policies such as open access transmission and the introduction of competitive wholesale electricity markets, and they were just starting up. And so around this time, retail competition was also being adopted in various states, but I'll leave that to our next speaker, who's going to fill you in on that piece of the story. And so as these policies were being put together, state regulators were grappling with a really tricky balance. There was this new regional grid operator being formed known as MISO, and they were taking over things such as overseeing wholesale electricity markets, centralizing transmission planning, and maintaining the reliability of the bulk electric system. State regulators were giving up a little bit of their control of the old way of regulating utilities, where everything was really handled within a state's borders. They would no longer set all of the rates and the rules that impacted their customers and their utilities. But At the same time, state regulators, this is the balance, saw the huge upside that comes from pooling risk over a much broader regional footprint and optimizing generation to make sure that the lowest cost electricity could be serving customers at any moment in time. So to get comfortable with giving up a little bit of that control, the regulators created OMS, and they formed this coalition to come together to learn about wholesale markets and transmission planning, to monitor this new entity. And in doing so, they created a vehicle to develop consensus, amplify their voices, and advocate for changes that were beneficial to their collective customers. Importantly, as I mentioned earlier, this organization serves as a platform to challenge each other's thinking. So we have this coalition, it still exists today, made up of very different states with very different industries, customer mixes, and policy priorities. But when you think about it, it turns out that all of these state regulators really care about the reliability of the power grid. And they really care about the affordability of electricity. And they would all prefer to pay less for transmission and that it was in somebody else's backyard. So a lot to unite that diverse group of states. And so this group has come together time and time again over the past 20 years to learn about major changes in the power grid, advocate for things that are beneficial to their customers and to their state, and to improve the reliability of the power grid. My favorite example of this is very recently the grid operator moved from a single summer planning requirement where all utilities have to have enough generation to meet their summer needs, and then everything would be good the rest of the year. You'd have enough resources to get through fall, through winter, and if you could meet that summer need, you were good. And that's how the whole industry operated since the very beginning of the electric industry. And after the polar vortex of 2014, back then I was a staff engineer at the commission. I was digging through the fresh NERC report on that polar vortex and briefing the commissioners on what the heck happened in this particular February of 2014. And we were grappling with a really fun question, which was, how in the world, in places like MISO and PJM, where we had 40% excess capacity available in the winter, on paper, were we within a whisper of a blackout in the polar vortex of 2014 after several days of extreme cold? So regulators in OMS got together and started to have these tough, challenging conversations about questioning that assumption that if you have enough to meet your summer needs, do you really have enough to serve your customers throughout the rest of the year? And so for the next 6 years and the next 4 polar vortices, the states continued to push MISO and to shift their requirements to a seasonal basis and look at what's really needed and how resources perform in different times of the year. We couldn't ignore performance shortcoming of various resources at different times of the year. You needed to really understand what your resource does in the winter versus what it does in the summer. And you need to do the math. You need to sharpen your pencils and really understand that. This change went live in 2022 after years of development and a lot of tough conversations. And while we were writing these tariffs as a group of regulators with MISO and with utilities, we lived through Winter Storm Uri and Winter Storm Elliott, all while we were developing these rules to address reliability risk in the winter. So these rules are now live as of fall of 2022. They're trickling into utility and state resource plans, and they're really forming a nice foundation for reliability of the Midwestern power grid. And I just wanted to underscore how important that coalition of regulators was, because there was tons of kicking and screaming making that change happen. And with any big change like that, there are winners and losers. Some generators are affected more than others. And you have people that are not excited about administrative change and new rules, and the lawyers have to rewrite the whole tariff. So there's a big hurdle. But the regulators came together as a coalition and saw the value in making this change. And we not only helped kickstart the conversation on moving to a more granular construct in MISO, but we also helped drag it over the finish line. And so I want to just say that, I lived through that process and things take a long time. I'm now honored to serve on the commission and do my part to promote the agency's mission in ensuring safe, reliable, and affordable utility services. And a big part of that is I now get to serve on the board of my prior organization and represent Wisconsin in those fun conversations. Whatever the next conversations are going to be, I'm going to be there and be a part of that, and I'm very excited to do that. So that is really the story I had to tell, and I want to just bring it back to customers first because it's so important to have a venue to share information, whether it's events like this or the Electric Wire podcast. The relationships and trusts that get built in those are critical when it comes time to do big, exciting things and make a push for a big change. So Customers First is recognized as a great partner, bringing together stakeholders to examine these big issues. And today is another really great example of that. You're going to hear coming up shortly when I stop blabbing about other interesting topics, including the case for deregulation in Maryland, which is up next, energy storage and SMRs, and updates from some of Wisconsin's energy providers. So again, I really appreciate being here today at the 2024 Power Breakfast and really look forward to the rest of the program. So thanks.
I'm going to introduce our next speaker, is Laurel Peltier. She's a Maryland-based advocate for energy and low-income families being able to afford their energy bills. And she led the effort to reform Maryland's energy supply marketplace, which became law, SB 1, in May of 2024. She chairs the Maryland Energy Advocates Coalition and is AARP Maryland's lead energy advocate. Her appearance on the Electric Wire podcast made it one of the top episodes, and here to present the reality of retail choice, Maryland's deregulation case study, is energy advocate Laurel Peltier.
Good morning. I wanted to say hi. This is my first trip to Wisconsin. My son is going to Colorado College, so we just road tripped up here, and then we're road tripping to drop him off. And Madison is amazing. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I am so happy because there are very few people that get as excited about energy as I do, and to be with the whole room of you is just it's really cool. So I'm sure you know it when people ask you what you do. Yeah, it can be boring at times. But I am going to cover residential retail energy, and I live in the state of Maryland, a very small state, and it's been an interesting story. So I'm going to go like this so I can see my slides. So there's one thing I wanted to share is I focus on residential retail choice, and there's commercial, there's community aggregation, and then there's wholesale buying, and truthfully, those things are actually working quite well, but I wanted you to know that I specifically focus on the residential market. And I also wanted to say, because I think this is going to be taped, is that I am a volunteer. I am not paid by regulated utilities. Also, because you can imagine when you see this, there's a lot that goes out there about my work, but I really focus on consumers. I want everybody in my state to be able to afford their utility bill. Keep the power and lights on. So I'm not for regulated utilities. I'm not against deregulated utilities. I'm for regulation, though, because at least it gives people like me a chance to make a voice in this. So in the 1990s, as the previous speaker talked about, I don't know if you all know that this whole deregulation thing really was led by Enron in most of the states. They were out in every single state house, and they were pushing big time to break up the vertical monopolies and create competitive markets. And in today, there are 13 states, and I want you to notice Texas as being most notable. And just write in your notes that it is consolidated now. It's been over 20 years, and it's like every product. There are three big players: NRG Energy in Texas, Vistra Energy in Texas, and Constellation. So the orange states are the states right now that have fully deregulated their residential commercial markets, meaning that everybody can shop for electricity and gas. And it is about 30% of the energy electricity load in the country. And And what I want you to notice is that I'm going to give, the source of this was a CNET article, and I put the article in my presentation, which you all will get, and I want you to read that article because there's a very big gotcha that is never talked about. And as I was reading this article, I was like, this is a very good example to show people the gotcha on why this isn't working. The market is separated into two things, a hybrid model like my state and the Texas model. And Texas is very unique because most of you will hear that Texas is completely deregulated, which isn't true. The ERCOT is deregulated, and there are no regulated utilities that customers work with. They only work with suppliers. Again, NRG and Vistra are the two big players, and as you know, they used to be the regulated utilities way before Texas deregulated in 2000. So what you have in Texas is you have 6.5 million families that only buy from a regulated utility. You can see the ads on TV, free weekends, the grandmas, the aunts, the college students, every single person re-ups, if they're smart, they re-up their electricity accounts in Texas. That's a very large market. My state only has 2.3 million accounts. So there's 6.5 million people that have to choose electricity from a supplier. Over half of Texas, about the other half, is fully regulated. That would be like the Austin territories and lots of big municipalities. And they have no retail choice in Texas. The Northeast states, which I'm part of, are a hybrid. You have residential and commercial customers can choose their electricity and gas from, like for me, my BG&E utility owned by Exelon. Exelon pretty much owns my state with 85% of the accounts. Or I can choose a retail supplier. The regulated utilities still deliver, service, and bill the customers. And I brought some examples because if you're curious what this looks like in a bill, it's very interesting. It is all consolidated on one bill. And the supplier charges, you'll see, they're very hard to find on here. So that is how the states are split up. And just off the bat, I can tell you it didn't work in Maryland at all. We passed this in 1999. It didn't really even start till 2010 because of something I'm going to cover called purchase of receivables. 75% of the offers of the contracts are sold at the door or in a big box store. So if you're in these 13 states and you're in a Walmart, you're at a BJ's wholesale club, you're at Best Buy, or you live in a low-income area with a lot of dense urban housing, you're going to have an energy salesman come up to you and talk about how cool it is to switch to an energy supplier. I'm saying this because we are all energy professionals and love this, and we would get online and shop and know what we're talking about. That is not how most people become a retail energy supplier. Very important if they come into your state to talk about shopping. It is mostly a push model done by salespeople. And I can tell you, if you are selling a product that costs more, and as you're going to learn flips to a variable rate, a lot of interesting stories come about how cool this product is. Those folks, I think, are part of the issue, too. They are commission-based. So think about that. 7 o'clock at night, low-income neighborhood. Think about some of the places we've all been to. And someone comes to your door. They're not walking through the contractual stuff. They are trying to get their commissions. So it's a very interesting business model. Our state, you'll see, I'm going to go through the results pretty quickly because they're horrific, and there's a lot of data that I had to pull together. Because when I started this in 2016 as a reporter, nothing, no reporting, nobody had any idea this was happening. And I was a reporter and kind of stumbled onto this out in the field. We did 2 laws so far in 2021. Like almost all states, we did not allow retail supply to charge more than regulated utilities for accounts on energy assistance. So think about that. All these 13 states except Texas and a few little ones, they won't let a retail supplier charge more to an account that is getting state funds to pay down their bill assistance. Secondly, we just had a very big fight. Exciting, crazy, but in 2024, our state had to go through the legislature And we basically reformed this market to allow for choice, but also to allow for consumers to be able to pay their bills. In the other 3 big states, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York, they did this kind of reform through their PUCs or PSCs. Mine's called a PSC. So here's the nut. Here's the story. You can see in 2013 and 2014 was that big polar vortex. The red line is the state's average residential electricity rate in red, and the black is the regulated utilities. And from the get-go, consumers have always, on the aggregate, paid more. And when I say more, I mean in my small state, you can see we were one that just got extracted a lot of revenues. This is revenues above regulated utility revenues. This is apples and oranges. This is how much extra, $817 million. This is all pulled off the federal EIA 861 files. You can just kind of play with the data back into what regulated utilities delivery was and get this number. And that is not the story that they say when they go into states at all. What really happened and what caught my attention is our state has the strangest geography, but Baltimore is the largest city. It's about 600,000, but the area is about 1 million. And we have some very low-income zip codes. And what I noticed is these guys were only in the low-income zip codes. And later the PSC helped us because there was no data. So this was the first thing that came out, was saying like, okay, these advocates aren't crazy. It is true. They're selling in the low-income areas, and those purples really are the low-income areas. And in there's a little teeny orange dot right in the middle of Baltimore City, and that's where I lived. It was called Roland Park, and they weren't selling there. And that is where higher income families lived, and they were literally selling around my zip code. So again, at the door in low-income zip codes, you can already see what's going to happen. This is data that did not come from our state or the federal government. This came from, I always say it came from God. It came from a Berkeley PhD student, brilliant lady named Jenya Conlang, and she had this question, why are low-income accounts, why is she reading in so many states they're paying so much more? And our regulated utility, BG&E, gave her 3 years of billing data. And she did a gorgeous report, 108 pages, and this to me was really the answer. And it was true. You can see the state regulated fixed rate, it changes twice a year in our state, is the red line. The purple line was the higher income accounts. The middle line is middle income, and you can see the low income was paying a lot more. That, again, that's not what you want. So in the end, with no rate oversight, Maryland overpaid. Residential customers have paid over-regulated electricity rates and gas rates, $1.2 billion. And this data is about 1.5 years old, because I won't get 2023 until October of 2024. So $1 billion for a little state like ours is a lot. And you guys, you can only imagine. I would see accounts. The Wall Street Journal had a couple of my folks in there, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 more in a few years. I mean, terminations. It was, and often they looked at me and they were like, "Who's this supplier?" I mean, they had no idea because they got a gift card at the door. And there's a lot of slamming. That's a term for when somebody is an unauthorized sale. They just need the choice ID number, and they can take it from the regulated utilities supply over to the supplier's supply. And it's all in the bill. So you really have to read that bill. And as I think most of you know in this room, that's not something that a lot of people do. And they don't do it well, I'm learning. So now I'm going to start getting into the stuff that is sort of new. There is a narrative out there that there are a couple bad guys, and that there's a lot of good players and a few bad guys, and that's just not true. And what I'm showing here is 2022. This is a slide that we used for legislators, and the state's SOS on average was 8 cents. That kind of matched a few of the states here. That's just electricity supply. Retailers were at 12.1 cents. A full 50% higher for my little teeny state. By the way, it just got worse and worse and worse every year. because the more you price higher, your customers churn out, so they just upped their rates. Almost $180 million just from Maryland. But the only player that was close to the 8 cents was Constellation. All the other players, and WGL, that's Washington Gas, you start getting to the point where like 10 cents over 8 cents is good, because you have players in the 19s, 12s, 13s, and that's just the kilowatt hour rate people were paying. So how is this happening? I get this question all the time. People are smart. U.S. consumers are so smart at shopping. Yes, they are, except there's 3 things that are rarely shared when this massive industry goes out to all the states, and they're in many states right now, talking about competitive electricity. There's 3 things. So this is my key, page 11. Sell low and bill high. Intro rates to variable rates. This is something that regulated utilities do not have. This is baked into every contract. I will share that with you. Consumers have to reshop. These are short-term contracts, unlike regulated utility contracts. They can be anywhere from 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, and now I'm seeing 60 months. At the end of those contracts, imagine, think of the people in your family and your friends. You have to reshop this. Most of them are like, I don't even know what I'm on. And then lastly, something called purchase of receivables. Remember, this is an industry that says that they are for the free market. Wait till you see this excellent regulation that is baked into the big states. So bait and switch contracts. It's kind of like a subscription model in a way. It offers a short-term length and a liberal use of teasers and gift cards and airline miles. And buried in the fine print, which I brought some samples, is you got to stay on top of these contracts. When that contract expires, the rates will quietly change to variable rates, which can change any month, any invoice, and they have no maximums, no regulatory oversight. The suppliers can charge whatever they want to charge. And variable, so that's the bait and switch. Almost every single contract, there's 10 million households right now. This includes Texas. These customers have to stay engaged. And I can tell you, tons of data shows about 75% set it and forget it. I feel like I'm missing. Okay. So I wanted to show you an account that I was on with the big gun in this industry, NRG, and I put my home account on it, and this is how it works. It's a 3-month account. I was a 3% cash back. The black line is BG&E, so I did this in 2021. Remember when gas was a little bit cheaper? Is 7 cents, and I saved, it was 5.5%, which I did online. It's much higher at the door. The Berkeley report showed that they're so surgical, they charge higher introduction rates at the door because it's more expensive to send out a salesperson. I saved for 3 months. It went up to the SOS rate, and then it went up to 9 cents. It stayed there for a little bit, and then I was officially a sleeper account, which means I am asleep, and then it just chick, 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 and finally my husband was like, "You've made your point." So, but it would go up. I can tell you right now, this company is sitting at around 14, 15 cents variable rates for sleeper accounts. So the second, so that's variable rates in there. That is a bait and switch contract. This is a contract that I would not have gotten a letter for saying that I need to reshop because I had signed a contract saying I understand it's only a 3-month introduction rate. This is really interesting. This took me 2 years to figure out because I asked, okay, I'm seeing all these low-income folks not pay their bills. How are they making money? How is a supplier making money? Because I would think they'd have a lot of default. In the early years, the suppliers convinced the PSCs, this was a regulation done by my state's PSC, not the legislators, that the utility would own the receivables. So when the supplier's charge for that month is printed on the regulated utility, that utility contractually, because the state told them they have to buy up that receivable, put it on its books, do all the collections, the termination notices. You guys know more than I do what it takes to get bad debt paid back or before it becomes bad debt. and then that supplier gets paid the minute that bill is cut. So this is called purchase of receivables. This is in all of the states. It's in Illinois, it's in Maryland, New York, New Jersey. So think about this. If you have no rate oversight, you have a lot of people who aren't great shoppers. Commercial shoppers are much better. Community aggregators, cities, much better shoppers. You have purchase of receivables. This is not a bad market to get into. This is Texas. This is why Goldman Sachs and Blackstone and a lot of big companies, there's just money to be made. So those are the three things you won't see a lot of people talk about. That's why I'm sharing this with you. You guys are a very influential group, and you can share this with other states just to know what to look out for. So in the end, this is 2022, and this is showing you just by household what the average overpay was. New Jersey was a touch higher than my state at $500 and $485 per account on average. That's just electricity. And then you can see Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Illinois. You can break out MISO, Texas, New York, and the Illinois PJM. It's $2.5 billion more just in 2022. And on average, every single state is overpaying. I call it the lottery. But this is the part I want you to know. I'm not going to get a lot of fan mail for showing this, but who is driving this? This is extremely important when they're out in the states. So this is not my best chart because I just came up with it, but 67% of the overpays just in electricity are from two major players. They're both Texas players, which kind of makes sense because they are making a lot of money in Texas. So NRG, so the way to read this is there's the state, there's the USA numbers in general. So Texas contributed $1.5 billion in overpays. Maryland, Illinois, you can see it gets down to the $2.5 billion. And then NRG, that's how much over SOS they extracted by state, $853 million. And then Vistra is much smaller in the other states, but you can see in Texas, it's just right there in EIA. They just charge really high rates. And then Clean Choice is a player that is green energy. I do not have enough time today to talk to you about the whole green energy, voluntary unbundled renewable energy certificate, but it is not what consumers think they are buying. And there's a lot of great data, and that's on my website that has all of this in a library that can be shared. What is important about this chart is that these two players are behind the Retail Energy Advancement League. You'll see them at NARUC, and they're also behind RESA. And they have a lot of lobbyists. Just to give you an idea, in my little state for SB1, and the last day before the bill signed, there were 29 lobbyists in our state, just doing their very best to not reform it. So I have a new website. I had a website that I put all this on from my state, and it's called Retail Energy Revealed. It's really intended for everybody to just have a library of resources, and it has each state's numbers.
So this is one of the benefits of being in person rather than on the podcast. I'm not the only one that gets to ask questions. So if you have questions, I will come over to you, and you can ask Laurel as well. But I was hoping first you just mentioned SB1, which was sort of like a re-regulation that passed in Maryland. I was hoping you could just share a little bit more about that process and what that bill did.
So Senate Bill 1 just was signed into law by Governor Wes Moore on May 9th. And basically it put three things. It put rate regulations back on this product so that suppliers can't charge higher than the regulated rates, and it's a 12-month trailing average for both electricity and gas. That is probably the most important thing that needed to happen. Now, it's important, I didn't talk about this, but industry talks a lot about the differences and how what I just shared is completely bogus because I'm sharing regulated rates to their product because their product is green. Their product is renewable energy. It has airline mile points. They had gift cards and all that. I'm going to share with you, I did not see a lot of people at all with these benefits. So I always share with people, that's great. That is their big differentiator. Then ask them, show me the data. How many accounts are on these extra products? And my state is, like your state, really pushing toward climate agendas. And if there is a green product, or I'd call it like 100% clean energy product, that is now regulated as well. They can take their product to the PSC, and there's a brand new, almost matrix, that they can charge more, but they have to make sure that what you're not paying for is like an incineration voluntary rec, or maybe a cheap rec out of Washington State for hydro. It's, and people think that they're getting PPAs out of a windmill, because if you look at the marketing, just go online. That's exactly what they say, because they can, because the FTC in their green guide said it's cool to call it renewable energy. So SB1 does have a green power plan, entire like rate design, and we eliminated purchase of receivables. So the industry is going to be responsible for their own bad debt. Here's a couple cool ideas, and this came straight from people working out in the field. A lot of seniors. AARP this took a village in our state. I mean, there were hundreds of people. AARP Maryland was a very big player. Excellent legislators. We really had like the best legislators. It was just the stars aligned. It was fun to be a part of this. But a lot of seniors are getting stuck in this. They call on the phone, they're out. So if somebody has cognitive challenges or someone's taking care of them, one of the things you can do now in Maryland is you can say, I want my account to essentially not be able to be transferred to a third-party supplier. There's reporting. This is kind of exciting because we lost a lot of reporting bills in Maryland, but now they have to report. And what's going to be interesting is to report on the gas, because the numbers are, oh my heavens, they're terrible on gas because there is no national reporting. There's a ton more. There's lots of PSC oversight. It's about 26 provisions. But retail choice is still going to be alive in Maryland, and I'm going to give a shout out to Constellation, because I just got this card, and they are offering a very good consumer product with no extra fees. It used to be a $10 fee, and they'll keep somebody, if their rate beats the regulated utility, they'll keep them on that, and if they can't offer that rate, they'll put them back on SOS and just kind of change them. So we're already seeing the benefits.
I wanted to give you the chance to clarify something too, because I think you got into energy because of your concern for the environment. And so I think, you mentioned the green rates and environmental goals and stuff like that. I think it's important to understand that you want to see cleaner air, and you want to see improvements for the environment, but you want it to actually happen, and not just for someone to be telling consumers that that's what they're getting, but they're really not.
Yes, I actually, if you go back, I wrote a lot of articles about switching to a green energy supplier, and I took at face value that I was buying renewable energy. As you know, our PSs are all done through RECs, but those are compliance RECs. And there's more of a market for compliance RECs. The voluntary unbundled market is its own animal, and there is a lot of data showing that it's ineffective. I would say Michael Gillenwater, I have a whole report on this, because if you're going to spend on average $725 more to be on a green plan, that's how much 100,000 people in my state paid to be on 100% clean energy. You want that money going to building out new clean energy. That is really, when you listen to what RECs were supposed to be, it was supposed to help motivate and fund more clean energy. But voluntary market is really not doing that. And that is the product they were selling. And often I would go and really dig in there, and people were spending. I'm going to give you an example, and she spoke at one of our hearings. She was on a company, one of the largest green companies. They do claim to buy PJM voluntary RECs, and she spent 41 cents versus 10 cents supply, a very large house, and over 2.5 years paid $17,000 more for RECs. And she's very smart. When she found out that she was paying for a renewable energy certificate. After studying it, she was beyond. So I think if you're going to offer green energy, as I've said many times, great, go out and build those solar farms, do community solar, but show consumers that if they're going to really spend a significant amount of money voluntarily and they want to, then it should be legitimate. And I hope that the laws in our state push that money into really building clean energy. Did that clarify that?
I think it does help to clarify. And I know in Wisconsin, the utilities offer green pricing programs that are regulated by the commission. So you've got a little bit more of a guarantee that you know what you're getting if you sign up.
And people, I mean, right now, that really is what they're hanging their hat on. And if people understand what they're buying, and if I said, hey, I'm going to spend, a solid 6-7 cents more to buy renewable energy certificates, I think that's fair. It's just that is not what people are seeing. They literally think, like one of the ads right now is saying it's comparable to solar panels on your roof. And that's, because it's regulated, and I now wrote in and said that is not a legitimate marketing claim. I know it is not the same as putting solar panels on your roof. And people want to support clean energy. There are a lot of people, especially in the higher income families, who really want to make a change, and you just have to make sure it's actually working.
Great. Questions? Marcus.
Thanks. One question I had was, have you done any work on probably the small handfuls of people that have actually saved money, maybe on like a time of use rate, or just like how rare that is? Because I'm sure there's exciting products like the ones we saw in Texas when people ended up owing tens of thousands of dollars. But are there any like unicorn successes, and have you done any work on that? I've seen data from other states that maybe 10% of the people were saving. I do find there is a market. I think everybody in this room falls into it, very knowledgeable. I'm cheap. I like to be able to save. I have a master's in business. The contract made perfect sense to me. Actually, I was very surprised when I first learned about variable rates. I was like, well, why would somebody be on a variable rate? But I have never seen, and I think that would be very good for industry to show, who's saving and who keeps reshopping, because you really can. It's a scheme. If you follow it, and if you're good at going online, you can pay less for sure. But you have to be one of those people, as I heard someone from Pennsylvania once say, that checks their 401k each quarter. You really do. And you have to it even gets more nuanced, like gas. I got mixed up in gas. I'm like, I can't get out of a gas contract. So we don't have that Giddy product, which was a market-based index product in Maryland, just because we're probably too small. I just think those are products for a completely different buyer. But that is who's saving. And so, yes, you can make the claim. You can save. If you read the marketing, you can save. Can is not the word after 20 years, especially when you have a lot of people getting terminated. Terminated, can you imagine? And then they find out from me it's $1,500 you just paid to somebody, and they're like, you've got to be kidding me. And it's legal. It was legal.
We've got a couple more minutes left for questions, if anybody's got one. All right, sure.
Thank you. When you're going back for the low-income neighborhoods, what are you all doing? What is Maryland doing? Are they being educated? Is that working? Or how, what are we doing? What are they doing to actually educate those low-income customers that, oh my God, this gives me anxiety. But what has the state done to help educate those low-income customers about what is actually going on in Maryland?
That's such a good question. I am a low-income energy advocate, and this really brought me into it. I think it's not the sexiest part of utilities I've learned, but when I went out there and really learned what low-income families are facing, it was very different than what I thought. So it is It is actually hard to reach the low-income segment. I find they're actually kind of insulated because they're highly preyed on. And this is one thing that was very unusual to me starting. What I did to get the first batch of research for a report is I actually sat in a low-income energy assistance center for 6 months and literally pulled bills because there was no reporting. And the Able Foundation was paying me to write a grant about this issue to the state because no one knew about it. And what I learned is that one of the reasons it's relatively hard is because they're so scammed and so easy to find that they kind of stay insulated. So phone calls and mail and stuff like that wasn't getting through. We ended up with AARP and a lot of the partners just doing grassroots, like literally there's signs everywhere, never ever sign up with an energy supplier. We got on TV shows. But the big change happened in 2021 with SB 31, which basically said for contracts after July 1st, 2023, you can't charge more. And then the numbers just dropped because they were all on variable rates. The majority were on variable rates. Just to give you an idea, out of 58,000, we got new reporting, 58,000 energy assistance accounts right now in the BG&E territory. Only 700 of them are on an energy assistance, a retail supplier. When I started this, 55% were on it. So low income, our state is really stepping up. We have our Olympics is on August 28th. We're looking at low income rate design automatically. I mean, it's really getting bad, especially the gas rates and what we call gasapalooza, just the massive gas spending right now. We had 7% of BG&E was terminated in 2023, 100,000 accounts. So we're happy that retail choice now won't be an issue, but our state is spending a lot of resources to see how can we get out there, and we're using all the tools, the MEA money, the IRA money, and case management. My whole team just got because we're out in the field and we kind of know how we're learning how to work and case manage. We're actually realizing you just got to do it in person. Like if someone says, I have a web address, I'm like, oh, because they use smartphones. The majority of my clients are low tech, but they all have smartphones and they use texting pretty often. So it is an art and it's exciting, and we are going to get these energy burdens down. They're very high in Maryland. And one of the positives was retail choice will hopefully help them now and not be harmful.
Thank you, Laurel. Okay, so I told you I was going to ask this, but we ask all of our podcast guests, if you had all the power in the industry, what would you do with it?
I am so glad I read that question last night. I was like, it's dovetailing on the low income question. And I have said this in many meetings. I think sometimes the jaws drop. I think that our consumers are so much smarter, and you talked about time of use. There are no good time of use rates. That's why no one's on them. They stink. So if we put people, and we actually told people, they're very, very price sensitive. Here's when you should be doing everything in your life at this time, and the rate is significantly lower. I know demand will massively change, and that's just not what utilities in my area are doing. And talking to people and explaining usage and kilowatt hours and therms, and explaining that if you have a heater that you haven't touched in 30 years, that's why you have 3,000 therms being used. Like, the lack of knowledge that is assumed on both parts is the secret sauce, I think, is really making it in someone's interest to actually really lower their AC during the day when they're at work, get that programmable thermostat out of the box and onto the wall, and make big savings available, and people will start using less really quickly because they're extremely smart. It's just not designed that way. And the second thing I would do is I would never e-bill a low-income customer. I'm sorry to say that to the utilities, but nobody's reading their bills. And every single person that walks in, my first thing I do is I say, can you find your actual bill? And then we sit there for 3 minutes where I show them how to get to their actual bill. I think there's got to be way more creative ways to bill. But if somebody doesn't even know their bill, and if you're behind, you're not going to look at that bill because you have your rent to pay. So I think a really cool thing is I would make every single person who worked for me spend a week out in the field and on the phones and helping consumers, and all the answers are right there. So that's what I would do. It's very different than sitting in a policy world or sitting in, because I used to do that, so I'm making fun of myself too. Is sitting in the spreadsheet world or looking at the Comar rules. But when you go out, and so it's really cool. We have people come out, like all the PSC commissioners now have come out and hung out at GEDCO, where I now volunteer. People from BG&E, the media, we just invite everybody out. I say, dress casual, and you're just going to spend 2 hours with me helping people figure out how to pay down their utility bills. And it's awesome. The ideas just roll right there. That's interesting. Why would the Section 8 payments go to the landlord? Why wouldn't the Section 8 utility allowance go to your utility bill? That's what I would ask. And I would pay for lunch for everybody, and then I would have a big focus group afterward and pay everybody $500 for the very best idea you got being out in the field. I think a lot of this is solvable, and I think it just takes a lot of creativity. That's not the energy transmission answer, but I really do think it's a people-based answer.
I agree. Thank you so much, Laurel. Thank you. It is always good. I enjoy hearing from our speakers and learning from them. We don't have to agree on everything, especially time of use rates or other items, but I appreciate hearing from you, and I do feel like I learned a lot. So thank you for that. I did want to take this time really quick before our break to acknowledge the members of the Customers First Coalition and our board members who are here representing them. So I'm going to start. I'll just list them for you. If you want to stand, that'd be great, and we can just acknowledge you. So Tom Content is here from the Citizens Utility Board. Luke Fuller is our board member from Dairyland Power Cooperative. Mike Bruning cannot be here from the IBEW 2150. Tim Heinrich, there's Tim, from the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin. Carrie Ann Renland from MG&E. Tom Hanrahan from WPPI Energy. And Rob Richard is here for Steve Fries from the Electric Co-ops. So thank you to all of our members.
I hope you all enjoyed Laurel's remarks as much as I did. Really some food for thought. We're going to turn you over right now to remarks from Brent Ridge, who is the president and CEO of Dairyland Power Cooperative.
Well, thank you. Good morning. We can do better than that. Good morning. All right, excellent. Well, I like to start every conversation or presentation with some gratitude and thanks. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm thankful for this morning. First, I want to thank Kristen for her leadership with this organization. Of course, Steve Fries as well. Their focus is our focus, which is reliability and affordability for our customers and members. The other thing I'm thankful for is I just look around the room and see such a diverse group across the political spectrum. And a lot that we'll talk about today, a lot we've talked about already, is about accelerating change. And I mean, we're talking big, difficult change, accepting nuclear power, getting that built, doing pump storage. We heard about rates in the regulatory environment. With that, when you're trying to accelerate change of big, really difficult things, you need the entire political spectrum. And I think we find common ground, particularly in nuclear energy. We're starting to see common ground as we work through the process. The other thing I'm thankful for is organized labor. I've been working with labor for the last 33 years, which is my entire career. And they've been an invaluable partner for me in my career, but particularly here in the upper Midwest, whether it's plant construction, plant operations, plant maintenance. we really would not be able to get what we want to get done, whether it's on the fossil fuel side, the nuclear side, or the renewable side, without their support. I'm thankful, Laurel, for a new word, gasapalooza. I have applications at work and at home for that, so I'm excited about trying that one out. All right, I'm going to talk about really three key things today. First, a little bit about Dairyland Power. That'll be important because it'll talk to why we're thinking about nuclear and pump storage and why it's going to be critically important. I'll talk about the market that we all operate in, and then, of course, the pros and cons of the new technology, or the technology that I'll talk about. So, just beginning a little bit about Dairyland. I'm not going to read everything on this slide, and I typically won't do that for any slide. You'll be able to see these later. But we're a generation and transmission cooperative. We're not for profit. And when you look at the area that we serve, it's 4 states. It's both our member cooperatives, which you see in kind of the colored sections along the map. And then you also see a lot of municipals. And we're growing in our municipal footprint. They are also invaluable partners as we grow our system and really drive towards our mission, which is safe, reliable, and cost-effective electricity delivery. The other thing that is interesting about this as we talk about renewables going forward, you'll see that sometimes our solar footprint isn't what it needs to be. And the wind isn't where you need it, the solar's not where you need it, and I'll talk a bit about those particular challenges. So moving kind of from Dairyland as sort of the micro level, moving up to the macro level, here's the footprint that we all operate in. This is MISO, the shaded section is MISO. You see Dairyland's footprint up in the northern part of that. We represent about 5% of the MISO footprint, but only 1% of the load. That's a feature of being a rural electric co-op. And we joined MISO in 2011. I don't think we've yet figured out MISO. I think MISO changes every day. But I will say they're also really good to work with. They focus on the right things. They focus on safety and reliability. And sometimes you'll see in the news, you'll hear things about MISO that might not be particularly positive. I find that they are critically important to maintaining reliability in our system. I believe that the issues in Texas, both in 2014 and then just a couple of years ago, could have been largely avoided if they had some oversight and reliability control that MISO provides. So I'm a big MISO fan. And I'll talk a bit about our portfolio. So first, we talk about renewables. We have a few hundred megawatts of renewable on the system and scheduled to come on, but we're also looking to grow that through the Inflation Reduction Act and a particular grant program for G&T cooperatives, about $10 billion set aside for renewable projects. And we've been in the news recently that we've been moving through the award process that could add 1,000 megawatts of renewable to our system in an affordable, reliable way. And so we see our renewable portfolio expanding. But there is some challenges to renewables. And each time I talk about a technology, we'll talk about the pros and cons. So renewables' greatest feature is it's got free fuel. Its biggest drawback is that fuel availability is not always certain. And so we have to have an energy source that can fill those gaps as we go forward. We also have a fossil fuel fleet. And, the pros of these is you have pretty solid fuel supply. In a coal plant, you could have up to a 6 months to a year of fuel on the ground that you need during the coldest and hottest times. Gas is cost effective right now. If you'd asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have said something different. So one of the drawbacks of fossil fuel is the volatility of the price. Then if we look at the transition, and this is where we start to think about why nuclear. So we start to think about our transition. If you look just in 1999, we were virtually 100% coal. And in the 20-some years since then, we've kind of been able to get to a lot less coal, but still today we're probably 60% coal with a target of being about a third and a third and a third for gas, coal, and renewables by 2029, 2030. Now, I talked about the new era or the IRA funding for renewables and adding that 1,000 megawatts. That's really going to accelerate that transition. So if that comes to pass, we're going to see a significant reduction in our coal use and a significant increase in our renewable use, and the grants will allow us to do that in an affordable way. But there's some areas that are under attack. Think about coal and the new EPA rules. If those survive the court challenges, we're likely to see a coal fleet that disappears by 2032, the way it's written today, and at least in terms of how it affects Dairyland and our plants. So at that point, I have an abundance of energy when the sun's shining and the wind's blowing once we put the 1,000 megawatts on. But then I've got to deal with providing safe, reliable energy at night. I've got to deal with it when the wind's not blowing. And right now we do that with our gas and coal plants. But if you take away the coal plants, then you're left with limited options. Battery storage, frankly, isn't there yet, and it might not ever be there. And so that's where we start to think nuclear. And we are committed to carbon reduction, greenhouse gas emission reduction. And if you're against CO2 in the atmosphere from power, you probably need to be pro-nuclear. And if you're sitting here today thinking, I'm against nuclear for various reasons, and I'll talk about what those various reasons are that you might be against it, if you want to have safe, reliable, and affordable electricity and have a much lower CO2 footprint, nuclear is the answer. And we'll talk a bit about why that is and the challenges that lie in front of us. And so decarbonization within itself presents a bunch of challenges. And so this map, not going to go into the details, but just to show that we have a hodgepodge of regulatory help that we get every day from a reliability perspective. And when we think about decarbonization, there's a couple of significant challenges. So first of all these renewables have to be integrated into the system. And so when we think about building transmission lines, does anybody have a sense that when you think about building a transmission line, what worries you about that? What? Permitting, yes, thank you. It's permitting. When I think about building anything in today's world, it's permitting. And so without meaningful permit reform, are we going to be able to decarbonize? Because right now we're building a project with two partners that takes wind energy from Iowa into Wisconsin. It's called Cardinal Hickory Creek. It's on we're on a 10-year journey with that project. Should be energized here very shortly by the end of this year. That project's been holding up over 100 renewable projects from being built. And so anything that I talk about today, whether it's closing down coal plants, buying gas plants, building nuclear plants, building pump storage, building renewable energy, along with that has to come transmission infrastructure. And along with that has to come permit reform. So I've talked a bit about Dairyland, a bit about the system that we work within, and I'm going to talk about really what the challenge in front of us is. So I think the world's better off without major use of fossil fuel. I can get there. I think less CO2 in the air is better. But let's talk about the mountain we have to climb to get there. And so the next two slides show real-time data within the MISO footprint. So think about from Manitoba to Louisiana. This is what's happening from an energy perspective. When you look at this map, we'll go from the bottom up. The little yellow blips are solar. And this is winter, and this is January of this year during that super cold snap we had. It was also really sunny and really windy. So we had a lot of solar, we had a lot of wind, and that lavender section, that is nuclear and fossil fuel, with only about 20% of that lavender being nuclear. And so 60 to 70% of our energy on that day was coming from fossil fuel. Then if we jump ahead to the summer, a couple of things change. Higher peaks because of air conditioning use. And then you see literally pushing 80% of our energy coming from fossil fuels. You have a little more solar because the sun's out a little bit longer, but you see that the wind was significantly lower than it was on that winter day. And so when we hear folks say we are going to be carbon-free, carbon neutral by a certain date, by the way, what is that date? When are we going to be carbon neutral, carbon free? What do you read in the news? 2050, I like that. I hear 2030, I hear 2035, I hear 2040. And when we look at these real-time weeks, whether it's cold in January of this year or super hot in August of last year, if you talk to anybody at a utility, they're going to say, we have to build our system for the bookends, the coldest days and the hottest days. If the system is built just to work on that perfect middle day, we're going to break on the shoulders. We're going to break on the bookends. And so when I talk about these slides, what I always like to talk about is what's going on today. So about an hour ago in our system, where do you think the solar's at today? Not really good. All right. Wind is not really good either. It's probably it's a third of what it could be developing. And so any guesses on today, 1 hour ago, what percentage of our energy to keep these lights on was coming from fossil fuel? Throw a number out. But 90? 90? It's 70. So think about going from today to 2035, or gosh, even 2050, eliminating 70% of the electricity we're producing today at this moment and keeping the lights on. If you tend to have 100% of anything, and then you only have 20% of it, whatever it is, whether it's food, gas, you're in trouble. And so how do we get from today's situation, and it isn't looking at a year, it isn't doing stochastic modeling in the future. If we just fix today, how do we replace 70% of the energy? And then when you think about that, just as a thought experiment, we've already talked about permits. What other things are in the way? What are the stumbling blocks that are in front of us besides permitting? Supply chain. Workforce. And if you think about taking across the United States, now so I've slowly been building up to a macro level. So now we'll think about the entire United States. If we took all the fossil fuel away from the United States and replaced it with nuclear, and we did it today, because we're talking about today, you would have to build every nuclear plant that exists on the face of the earth to replace the fossil fuel energy that's produced in the United States. That seems hard, right? Yeah, it's really hard. And so everything I just talked about is why I think we got to start talking about nuclear now. We should have been talking about nuclear 20 years ago, and we did. We were talking about the nuclear renaissance. Folks heard about the nuclear renaissance that occurred 15 years ago. Do you know what tripped up the nuclear renaissance? What's that? Well, Fukushima. And so I was heading to the state senate in Washington State to talk about the nuclear renaissance the morning that Fukushima happened. That's a bad day in the neighborhood. It was not about the nuclear renaissance at that point in time. So if we look at nuclear just in general, so it's been around a long time. It produces 10% of the world's electricity, but 25% of the clean energy. And that number is misleading. That 25% assumes that, the nameplate capacity of wind and solar, you're getting the entire nameplate capacity. What's different about nuclear is you're getting clean energy pretty much 24/7, about 96% of the time. A gas plant will run 65% of the time. A coal plant will be less than 50% of the time. Solar panels will give you about 30% of their nameplate capacity. Wind, the early wind would give you about 40%. Currently, a new wind site with the current top-line technology will give you about 25-30%. And so it's not just about the cleanness of the energy, it's about the quality of the energy and its availability. And so nuclear provides you with 24/7, highly reliable, clean energy. Now there's downsides. What are some of the downsides that you can think about? Did I heard waste? Cost, waste and cost. Those are the two biggies that we've got to work on as an industry. Even when I'm with groups that are 100% behind nuclear, would start shoveling tomorrow, their first question is, what do you do about the waste? And the industry has not done a very good job communicating what we're doing. And Nuclear Energy Institute has formed a task force to focus on that issue and how we can communicate in a better way to the folks involved in the business. I had fortunate to be on that task force. And the reality is the way it's stored right now, and I had an office for 18 years at the red dot in the far left corner of that screen. My office was 1,000 meters from the storage facility for the nuclear fuel. It's secure, it's safe, it can be there for centuries. And then at some point in those centuries, we will find a central repository for it. And we have to be more clear in how we communicate the safety of the current system. That's actually an easier discussion to have, and it's probably an hour presentation by itself. That's an easier conversation to have than the cost issue, because we have a terrible reputation on delivering projects on time, on budget. We're talking projects that were balance sheet busters at $10 billion. They get built at $30 billion. This is not things that you want to hear as a shareholder of an IOU or a member of a co-op. And so there's a solution, and it's small modular reactors, call them advanced reactors. And as we walk through this slide, you'll see at the top key attributes it says evolutionary technology. It doesn't say revolutionary. All the technologies that we're looking at are consistent with previous technology that have been utilized around the world. One is called a pressurized water reactor. There's more than 50 commercial plants working in the United States, and there's some unknown large number in aircraft carriers and submarines floating around on top and under the ocean. And that technology has been around for more than a half a century. And so it's about converting that technology to commercial use, which is what the current fleet looks like: boiling water reactors, pressurized water reactors. And some of the smaller reactors take that exact same technology and make it smaller. And some attributes come along with that. They're easier to construct, they're easier to secure. And we think the challenges of waste will kind of remain the same. Not identical in all the technologies. Some will make it easier. But certainly from a construction perspective, there is clearly a window in my mind that we can build them safely and economically and within budget. But me and 100 other people can come up here and say that. We have to do it. And that's the key challenge, is getting the first one done. And then getting the second, third, fourth, and fifth. Because remember, to replace all the carbon-based electricity in the United States, it would take every reactor on the face of the earth to be built. You're going to have to start pretty quick if we're going to get that done and meet even a 2050 goal. The other key thing is when we talked in those graphs, we saw the solar go away at night, which I think it does all the time. And then you've got wind that's highly variable. You need plants that are dispatchable. And that means the plant can come up quickly, go down quickly. When wind goes away, wind will go away in 20 minutes. You could go from having, say, 1,000 megawatts of wind, then in 15 minutes you have 2. The new nuclear plants will ramp up within an hour to meet that demand. And if you'd asked me 4 years ago, I would have said, probably the most important attribute of a small modular reactor was going to be its non-carbon emitting power production. As I look at it today, that's important, and it might be equal to dispatchability. And I see it in our own system, and it's why I started with Dairyland's story. If we had 1,000 megawatts of renewables over the next 6-7 years, we're going to have a ton of energy. We're going to have all the energy during the day that we need with the solar. But what I need at night is a power plant that can ramp up and meet that need. And what nuclear brings is the ability to maybe run when the power costs are low and create hydrogen, serve other industry. But it offers attributes that get us built in a way that the large nuclear plants of yesterday might not be able to be done. And I'm struggling for an example of where there was a nuclear plant built reasonably close to budget and reasonably close to schedule. So that's the first thing we have to deal with. Frankly, I feel better about the public communication on waste or spent fuel than I've ever felt. And I think as we start to align with partners that might be against nuclear in the past, we're seeing folks like the Sierra Club, the Physicians for Social Responsibility, starting to think more about nuclear as a solution. I've talked a lot about the benefits already, and I won't dwell on this slide too much, but water use is a huge deal. And so when we talked about permitting, we were thinking about transmission permitting and land use. Well, when you get to a large thermal power generating plant, you're going to see water use become an issue. New power plants, including gas power plants, can be air-cooled now, and that seems to be the trend that we're going to go for. So we'd be building a plant, say, next to the Mississippi or next to Lake Michigan. You're going to use a lot less water than you would in the past, and that's going to help through a permitting process. We've talked about it being carbon-free. It can operate 24/7, or it can dispatch up and down with wind and solar. And then land use. Land use is a huge issue. And when we think about how much land does it take to produce energy for 1 million people, here's an interesting comparison, and we kind of brought it back into the Midwest. So if you're going to do wind, kind of think of the metropolitan footprint of Indianapolis. 230,000 acres. Solar, 48,000 acres. Kind of the entire footprint of Madison. And then nuclear, and I think in this particular spot we picked 640 acres because it was actually a dot that we could see on the piece of paper. So that's the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The reality is some of the SMRs have footprints less than 50 acres. That'd be a dot that we couldn't really see on this page. So from a land use perspective, water use perspective, nuclear has massive energy density. If we were going to compare nuclear fuel to fuel oil, diesel, probably a quarter of this room would be filled with barrels. And then if I compared that same energy to a nuclear pellet, it would be about the size of the tip of your pinky for the same energy density. But with that energy density comes a lot of responsibility from a safety perspective. And as an industry, not only do we have to communicate about cost and schedule, we have to communicate about not just the safety of the spent fuel, but the safety of the operations. Because there have been events in the world with Chernobyl that were serious, no kidding, terrible events at a power plant. We've got to talk through those publicly. The upside of where I think nuclear is going is we've seen it span across party lines. I had a chance to meet with the Trump administration in D.C. with the Department of Energy about federal support for nuclear. 100% supportive, looking for loan guarantees, grants. And then they had the transition to the Biden administration. About 18 months later, I met with the Biden administration. Same titles, different people, same exact message. And that might be the only thing that made that transition from Trump to Biden. So that's very, very, very good for us. And then talked about each of these benefits, but when we talk about electrification, EV charging, hydrogen production, we're going to need more energy. And that gets us back to energy density. And I'll close talking about pump storage. If you've heard about pump storage, this will be a refresher, but if we think about traditional pump storage, you'll have an upper reservoir, and usually a lower reservoir would be the river. And so then you're sucking water out of a river, bringing it up to the top, and then when the power is expensive, you run it back through the pump house that then becomes a generator. So we've been working with an organization out of Sweden and then Michigan Tech University to utilize existing abandoned underground mines to really do the same thing, create an upper reservoir and then use the water in the mines for the elevation difference to create the energy. And we think this is a really elegant solution. It looks to be cost effective. One of the biggest unknowns is what the permitting challenges will be. So in our brains, we think we're doing a good thing. We're taking an abandoned mine with potentially contaminated water, cleaning the water, creating a wetland and a lake area, and then producing electricity for that. So we're excited about that. We think that's a longer-term play than nuclear. I think there's a lot of support for this technology as well within the Department of Energy. So we're excited about that.
Brent, there's one thing. I'll just ask one question, and then we can save some questions for Brent for the panel that's coming up next, because Brent will also be on the panel. But I was just hoping you could give us an update on the timeline for SMRs and pumped hydro storage. Yeah. What you're thinking now.
Yeah. So pumped hydro, I think if things go well, we could see something operational by 2045. I think it's a longer-term challenge. Could be sooner, but it's still in the nascent phase of trying to figure out the permitting, the economics. So probably in a year I would know better. So nuclear, we've got a much better target. And when I say we, I mean the entire industry. The federal government is stepping up with significant funding and really risk backstops through loan guarantees to get things going, like restarting the shuttered Palisade plant in Michigan. Without that federal assistance, we're not going to see any utility, whether they're a co-op or an investor-owned utility, to say, okay, I'm going to risk my balance sheet for this plant. So the government is very active in trying to work through that. For us personally, we're going to be looking at a program, and I may have the name wrong, but it's essentially taking a coal site, moving it to nuclear. When I'm aggressive and I'm thinking about what we can accomplish as an industry and as a team, as a region, there's a possibility by the late 2030s that there are a number of small modular reactors operating in the United States. And my goal by mid-2030, late 2030s, is that we have a small modular reactor operating on one of our former coal sites. And when my board hears that, they get a little nervous. I get a little nervous. My staff gets a little nervous. But I do think there's potential for other sites in the United States to be operating by 2030, 2035. And it's going to be a public-private partnership, utility, maybe a big chemical company that needs a lot of energy, a foundry, and then the federal government. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
We're starting next with the energy providers panel that Kristen has put together. So as they get seated, I will introduce them to you. First member, obviously, we just heard from Brent Ridge from Dairyland Power. He'll be representing the voice of electric co-ops as energy providers. Next to Brent, we have Nicholas Cum, General Manager of the Marshfield Utilities. They're a municipal utility in central Wisconsin that's been serving customers for 120 years. Nick also serves as director at the Great Lakes Utilities. They're a joint action organization that serves 11 public power communities across Wisconsin, and he's also the board chair of the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin. Then we have next to Nick, Carrie Ann Renland. She's the vice president, general counsel, and secretary at MG&E, an investor-owned electric and natural gas utility based here in Madison. She's also a board member of the Customers First Coalition. And to, I guess, my right, your left, Tom Hanrahan, General Counsel for WPPI Energy, a member-owned and not-for-profit organization serving wholesale electric power to 51 community-owned electric utilities. Tom serves with Carrie Ann in the Customers First Coalition Board of Directors and is the immediate past chairman. Moderating the panel will be Kristen Julks.
Thank you, Anne Marie. We first aired a series of podcast episodes about Wisconsin's energy providers on the Electric Wire in the fall of 2022. It was a very popular series of episodes because people, you'd be surprised how little people know about the energy providers in our state. Sometimes things get jumbled or confusing, and so we really just wanted to help people understand the different types of models that are serving in our state. We are a regulated state, so customers are assigned one utility, and the utilities directly serve the customers. But in our energy provider series, we did not get into the joint action agencies. And so I'm really happy to have Tom Hanrahan here today from WPPI Energy, and Nick also as a director at the Great Lakes Utilities. And so they're going to share a little bit more that you didn't hear in our series about joint action agencies and their role in helping provide power. So Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you to start off our panel. I'm going to ask all of the panelists to tell us more about the model of energy provider that they're representing. But I'm going to start with you, and you can hopefully give us a little bit more insight into what is WPPI and what is a joint action agency?
Sure, happy to give that a shot. Is this on? Yeah. So WPPI was formed in 1980, and we currently serve 51 customer-owned utilities, primarily in Wisconsin, but also in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and in Iowa. 50 of our members are municipal utilities, and we actually serve one electric cooperative in Upper Michigan. WPPI was formed as a way for municipal utilities to be able to sort of combine forces and get economies of scale and power supply, a greater ability to provide cost-effective services to customers, and to advocate on behalf of the municipal utility model. So we have about half of the municipal utilities in Wisconsin as members of WPPI. Nick's organization has a number of others, and a number are served by Dairyland, and some sort of are self-sufficient. So we provide essentially three things to our members: power supply, related services, and advocacy. From a size standpoint, we have about 220,000 customers. In terms of peak load, we're somewhere between Dairyland and MG&E, all roughly the same size. And we have a very diverse power supply portfolio. We own a number of resources. Some of our larger resources we own jointly with other utilities, including MG&E. We have a number of long-term resources that we purchase the output from projects owned by others. A number of those are renewable projects where WPPI, as a not-for-profit entity with no federal income tax responsibility, can't take advantage of federal tax credits, so we partner with taxable partners to make those projects available to our members. And then we have a real diverse series of shorter-term contracts. We try to always have flexibility in our portfolio to adjust to new customer load, customers leaving the system. So flexibility is really important to us. In terms of our power supply needs, we do share the state's goal of net zero by 2050. Reliability and cost is really, really important, as you have no doubt heard from others. We are on our way to that goal. As of next year, we'll have about a 45% reduction in the carbon intensity of our portfolio compared to 2005. So again, we're on our way. Our most recent two long-term purchases were renewables projects. We issued a request for proposals for projects in June, looking primarily at renewables, but looking at all other options as well. Just getting the responses back to that and sort of deciding whether there's anything there we're going to be interested in moving forward with. In terms of services, we try to provide services to our members that they might not be able to provide themselves directly. One, because some of our really small members just have a handful of employees. Other technologies that they might be interested in are very, very expensive, and they wouldn't be able to utilize those on their own. Examples would be advanced metering, customer information systems, billing systems, all those software technologies we purchase on behalf of members, and then they can subscribe to those programs and just pay a cost of those, again, at a much more efficient rate than they would pay if they had to go out and do it on their own. We provide rate and financial planning services to our members. Our Wisconsin members are all regulated by the Public Service Commission. Our Michigan and Iowa members are not. We have those services available to all of our members for setting their rates, and in Wisconsin, interacting with the Public Service Commission.
Just to clarify, the Michigan and Iowa members are municipal members, but they are regulated by local commissions. So they're still regulated in regulated states. I just thought I'd point that out.
Yep, no, that's an excellent point. Among joint action agencies, one thing that is unique about WPPI is we originally were transmission dependent. So when we were formed in 1980, we had, there was no MISO, there was no ATC, and WPPI itself did not own any transmission. Since then, in the formation of American Transmission Company, WPPI has become an owner of ATC, and so we have roughly a load ratio share ownership of ATC for our load in the ATC footprint. That's somewhat unique around the country. There are actually very few joint action agencies or small municipals who have ownership of the transmission grid. It's very beneficial to us. We bring lower costs to the ownership of transmission because we don't have a federal income tax responsibility, and we can issue debt at a lower cost of capital because we issue tax-exempt debt. We can actually bring those savings to projects that we invest in, and then we can use the returns that we own as transmission owners to offset costs and revenue requirements to our members and ultimately customers. So it really brings the cost down for our customers. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tom. All right, let's mix it up a little bit, and let's go to Carrie Ann next and share more with us about investor-owned utility model as well as MG&E. And I put this, I would like our panelists to answer, what is something that might surprise us about your provider model, just because I know many of us in this room are pretty familiar with investor-owned utilities, but share a little bit more, Carrie Ann. Thank you.
All right, I'm not real comfortable with this microphone situation, so I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'd like to just throw it and talk, but anyway, MG&E is an investor-owned utility, as Kristen said, and we are not only the smallest one in the state of Wisconsin, but we are also, we believe, if not the smallest, one of the smallest combined investor-owned utilities in the country. We've got about 163,000 electric customers, all of whom are located inside Dane County. And then we've got about 175 or so thousand natural gas customers, which are spread a little bit more to the in Dane County and also in western parts of the state. We are entirely regulated by the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin and subject to Wisconsin's regulatory compact. And what that means is that we have a defined electric service territory, and we're the only folks who can provide electricity within that service territory. But that means that we must do that for all customers all of the time, every day of the year, at all hours. In exchange for that right, our books and finances, really everything we do, are open for inspection. The Public Service Commission determines the prices we may charge our customers. We don't get the right to do that. The PSC does that. There are public proceedings over our rates and our hearings, so the public is able to, people like Tom Content are able to, participate in our proceedings and advocate that the rates charged to our customers are indeed fair. The Public Service Commission also has jurisdiction over whether the assets we propose to build to serve our customers are appropriate and justified and cost effective. And the purpose really of all of this regulation is to ensure that all of our customers have safe and reliable energy all of the time at a fair price. And this model differs wildly from other, private sector endeavors. I think you can think of the telecommunications industry as an example in our state that is not really regulated, and they're the perfect example of where you can be living on the same block with multiple different neighbors, and you're all receiving the same service, and you're all paying whatever you were able to negotiate for with whatever 18-year-old service provider was on the phone when you called to hook up your service. I mean, I think our model is we're providing a necessary service. All people need electricity, all people need natural gas, and we should be making sure that all people have that all of the time. And so we believe in our regulatory model here, and we believe that it works. So thank you to the commissioners who were here, who are now at a hearing, I think right now. I think they're an open hearing, and all the legislators who are here, and all the professionals from MG&E who work in this space and make sure that this process works. It really is a consumer protection model. So, and we are proud to have it here in Wisconsin. Laurel, thank you for telling us about your nightmare. We don't want to go there. But most of you know that we're in, a long energy supply transition right now. You may not know like the scale of that. For us, for MG&E, since 2015, we've added more than 200 megawatts of solar and 93 megawatts of wind generation in our renewable energy portfolio. We are expecting another 50 megawatts or so of that to come online this year, and our first battery storage project will come online this year as well. That, for us, that's more than $1 billion in clean energy investment estimated like through 2028 or so. With all of that investment, affordability is a huge priority for us. And so you might be surprised to know that the annual impact on our electric rates from 2016 to 2025 is about 0.9% increase. The gas rates over that period of time have had about a 1.4% increase. We are very aware that any increase is a struggle. There's no question about it, especially in light of other, problems in the economy. But those increases are below the rate of inflation, and we're very proud of that, and we'll continue to try to work very hard to make this energy transition as affordable as possible for our customers. And then one more thing on the you may be surprised about is that MG&E is expanding its use of agrovoltaics. Bo Stafford is here today. He owns, like a herd of sheep. And they are currently working their way on our Tidal solar project here in Fitchburg. Take a drive by. It's a 6-megawatt solar project, and there's about 100 sheep there right now. They arrived in July, and they'll be there through the growing season, and they are there to, manage the brush and ground cover there. So that's kind of fun, and thank you, Bo.
I love it. That does sound fun. We got to get out there. All right, Nick, let's go to you next, and you can tell us more about Marshfield Utilities and municipal utilities.
Sure, thank you. I guess first, thank you for asking me to participate and to be a part of this distinguished panel of industry leaders. First, as you mentioned, a municipal model with Marshfield Utilities. So Marshfield Utilities is one of 81 municipal utilities across the state. Just like MG&E and all the other investor-owns, we are regulated by the PSC. So all of our rate case proceedings have to go before the commission, or at least unless it's delegated to the commission staff. Marshfield itself is a municipal. We are considered an enterprise fund of the city, and I report to a 7-member commission that is appointed by the Common Council. We are located in central Wisconsin, and like many municipals, we provide not only electric service, but we also provide water and dark fiber. Marshfield specifically, we serve about 14,000 electric customers, or about a population of about 25 to 30,000 people, and we cover about 125 square miles. So not only the city, but out into the rural, a number of miles as well. Something unique about Marshfield is that we own and operate our own combustion turbine plant. We put that in service back in 2011. It's about a 60 megawatt unit and it's dual fuel, and it operates in the daily MISO market just like all the other plants. We are just a typical distribution company, ultimately looking to provide the lowest cost and the highest reliability to our customers. And we have a staff of about 50 employees, and as Tom mentioned, we are also one of the owners of ATC. If you don't mind, if I could go into the Joint Action Agency a little bit as well. So as mentioned, we are part of Great Lakes Utilities. It's a 11-member Joint Action Agency, 11 members across the Wisconsin, from large ones like Manitowoc and Wisconsin Rapids and Shawano to smaller ones like Bangor and Cornell. We serve about 70,000 end-use customers through that Joint Action Agency. GLUE was formed in 2000 as an alternative to the other models, the Joint Action Agency models that were present at the time. Our format is project-based, so it gives our membership an opportunity to determine which projects they want to participate in and those that they may not want to, or if it's a power supply contract, which ones they want to be a part of. As far as service offerings to our members, our main focus is on power supply, making sure that they have all the needs to meet the requirements. We do some other offerings as far as rate case services and advocacy and the like. The one thing that might surprise you about GLUE is that we are member managed, and we do rely on third party, but we do not have any employees. We actually, this means that since Marshfield is the member manager, and that means that I kind of have a dual role, and some of my staff do as well, where we're dealing with Marshfield's activities along with GLUE. And I do think this provides a huge value to some of our members. As they reach out to me about problems that they're dealing with, they're likely the same ones that I'm dealing with. If it's the local politics, if it's upset customers, or maybe just employee issues as far as retention or compensation. So,
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to clarify this because I think Carrie Ann and I both looked at each other like, I didn't know that. GLUE doesn't have any employees. Marshfield Utilities has a contract to manage GLUE, Great Lakes Utilities.
Yes,
Okay, got
yes,
it.
That's correct.
Thank you. And Brent, I think I may have misspoke because I didn't know. Is Dairyland a joint action agency, or are you technically slightly different?
We are a cooperative.
Yes.
So I came from a municipal joint action agency, so I'm very familiar with their model. And I'll just add just a couple of things that weren't on my slides. So we're not for profit, and when we think about our regulatory process, we are not as regulated. Some of that's good, some of that's bad. Our board makes our rates, so we have a lot of internal control, but we have a ton of transparency with our members. We have roughly 300,000 retail members. They all have a voice, and that will, well, there you go. Yeah.
It's our JD Vance moment. I said it as I was putting the tape up. Thank you so much, Representative Supreme Moro Mkunde. Thank you.
So we, in some ways, that rate making process, having our board be the rate makers, has some benefits, has some drawbacks. But fundamentally, we are owned by our members. Our members have a voice. They own equity, and we focus on democratic control. Every member has a vote. We have 24 members, which are the colored spots on that map that I showed you, so fairly large geographic areas. On our board, 24 board members, each member has a vote. And as we grow with municipals, with GLU and with Marshfield and others through all of our 4 states, we try to find vehicles for them to have a voice as well. And we have subclasses of membership that allow multiple classes of members to have a voice in the process.
Thank you. Okay, so what I want to do now, I'm mixing it up a little bit, is I'm interested to know if you all have questions about each other's energy provider model. I just got to ask one, and I feel like we know there's so many experts in the room, but what don't you know about each other's business models?
Well, I'll go first because it'll be very short. Since I came from a municipal joint action agency, I'm very familiar with their models. And any question that I would ask Carrie, she would not want to answer on camera.
Uh-oh. Nice. All right. Well, I really just wanted to spur discussion with that. Anybody else have one? All right. Then I'm going to ask you something that may be a commonality. And, we've talked today, and we're all well aware that Wisconsin and states across the nation are in the midst of a clean energy transition. We're all transitioning to cleaner resources, as Brent said in his presentation. And so I'm wondering how you believe this is impacting your customers and how you have responded to customers through this transition. Want to go first? Thanks.
So in addition to the clean energy transition I just talked about and the investments in our large-scale generation for our customers, we have, that's necessary, obviously, to fulfill our obligations to provide safe and reliable energy to our customers. But our customers, we also talk to them, and we try to meet them where they are. We have some of our professionals here, Shar Smith and Mario Garcia, Sierra and Pam Christensen. They spend their days engaging with customers to find out, are we serving them properly? Are they getting what they need? Can they afford their services? Are there ways that we can help them? So we really do try to meet our customers where they are. And they've told us there's a lot of focus on the clean energy transition, which is important. But at the end of the day, they want reliable electricity, and they want to be able to afford it. And so those are really just core things. They've also told us, but many of our customers really do care about their carbon footprint, and they care that we are reducing our carbon footprint, and they want to know how we can help them do the same. And that is typically more of an issue for commercial customers or some of our large municipal customers in our service territory. So we have had to adapt and do that in ways that we've never done before. And so in addition to this, the large-scale generation I talked about, you may also be surprised to know that we offer a very robust community solar program in our services territory. There are folks who would like you to believe that that is not possible within the regulated utility model, and that it just is not true. We provide both a renewable energy rider program, which allows our commercial customers the opportunity to benefit from a generator that we build, in most instances solar, or so far solar, and that they can have a share of and they can get the power from, that they do not have to build on their own scale or on their own roofs or on their own limited property with their own limited resources. We also have a shared solar program for residential customers so that they can do the same. And if they want to cover a percentage of their electricity with solar, they can. And they can do that. We have a shared solar 2 proposal that's pending right now before the commission that is meant to allow more low-income customers buy into that program as well. We also offer demand response programs to help customers shift their energy use and reduce peak demand, and also to reduce their carbon footprint. Some of those programs are Charge at Home for your electric vehicles, Charge Ahead. We also have, at the request of the City of Madison, put in some pole-mounted charging stations, and that is because customers want charging infrastructure for vehicles all over. We have about 50% of our service territory are renters, and so they don't necessarily have homes in places that it's as easy to charge their vehicle as others. And so that's a thing we heard from customers that they would like, and we're providing. We also offer voluntary programs to help customers offset their own carbon footprints. We have an option where you can purchase, it's called Green Power Tomorrow, and you can opt into the program and pay a little bit extra for your electricity in order to make sure that your carbon footprint is 100% clean energy. So those are some of the things that we've done in order to, meet customers where they are in this transition.
Is it on? Okay. Before I address the question, I'd be remiss as I was trying to make notes. As you can imagine, I got things scribbled everywhere, and I forgot to mention, as a municipal and as a part of the 81 of us, we are a part of a state association with Tim Heinrich, obviously being on the board of CFC, Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, and that provides a lot of value for the 81 members in the fact that it's helping both of advocacy down here at the Capitol at the national level. Also provides us a lot of training to make sure our staff is up to speed from our linemen being in the field. It also provides a lot of networking opportunities and another big one that we had to use a couple of years ago at a high level was mutual aid, in the ability of storm coming through and hurting or wrecking the infrastructure of one member, and all of us coming together to help support each other. But back to the question at hand. It's interesting you mentioned in Madison, and I always thought everything in Madison is different than us in Marshfield, but when you talk about your customer base and what they're focused on, ours are the same. They're really worried about low cost and reliable. The energy side of it and the renewable side of it is not so much front and center for many of them. At a high level, both Marshfield and Glue, we have a lot of long-term agreements in place, which have allowed us to be a little bit more strategic and hold a position more centered as we monitor the markets and react to opportunities that might present themselves from a renewable perspective. This has been very beneficial as we, back to Brent's comments, as we monitor and react to all the different national policy, especially from environmental, that we've been seeing that come through. At a more local level, we've had some members that have developed community solar projects that allow their customers to participate in varying degrees. And we also try to be supportive as we can to our customers, especially with, as they explore distributed generation offerings. We try to educate them, do site visits. And one thing we go maybe to the next level is we ensure that all installations go through some type of inspection, electrical inspection. Mic drop. Yes. Is that my cue to stop? But yes, we make sure that they're all inspected. As you can all imagine, this is very valuable to the homeowner at the end, because we've seen installations. There's obviously varying degree of skills and knowledge base of these installers, and this provides a reassurance to the customer that they have a quality product that they can depend on, and obviously be sellable if they decide to sell their property in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, my answer would sound very similar to Carrie's. I think with one fundamental difference is, if I was to look at the imperative in our system, it's affordability and reliability. I think the departure for us, being very rural, is we see very small percentage, single digits, maybe low single digits, where people are willing to sacrifice affordability for less greenhouse gas. And it has been interesting for us to transition. I talked earlier about potentially adding 1,000 megawatts of renewables. That's pretty easy in regulatory permitting space, particularly with the federal government and the state. We have to really work hard to justify that growth of renewables from an affordability perspective. And it's probably becoming the biggest challenge for us in meeting any sort of carbon reduction goal. But I would have answered the question exactly the same way.
Interesting. Thank you. Tom?
Nick, I had made the same note that I forgot to mention MEUW, but for WPPI and our members, working with MEUW is really important. They're a great partner to us in advocacy on important issues for our members. So I would echo everything you said. Thanks to MEUW. In terms of sort of customer interest in the transition, we provide a lot of the same programs that have been talked about. Really want to be responsive to customers who want to maybe go faster or further than the utility currently is through green pricing programs, through help with customers on installing their own generation. We've had programs to help offset the cost for nonprofits who aren't eligible for tax credits, just like WPPI. So that's been successful. We also have the same challenges that Brent talked about a little bit. We have members in Dane County, we have members in the WOW counties, and we have a 51-member board of directors, and not everybody is always on the same page about every issue, and we certainly have to be sensitive to that. And so, like customers who want to go further, faster, we have give members the opportunity if they want to go further than WPPI more quickly towards more renewables, that we can try to accommodate that as well. But we do agree that reliability is obviously key, and our members and their customers care a lot about costs.
So before we get to our last question for the panel, I did want to see if anybody in the audience has questions for the panel. Representative?
So in terms of our customers and their concern about the renewable transition, so I think if we look at the demographics of our members, we were formed 80 years ago to serve rural America and farmers. They have a different perspective than urban America on the benefits of carbon reduction. And one of the things we do is we work on educating for the benefits of renewable energy, and they have very strong benefits. So we don't approach it to say, you know what, we're better off with less CO2 in the air, which is something I believe. Just better off in general, the air our kids breathe. You can go down any path you want. It doesn't resonate with the vast majority of our members. What does is economics. And when you talk about a free fuel, sun, wind, and if you can get them built economically, in particular with federal support, we're able to support our communities, which is something people don't know. So if you think of rural electric co-ops, of the counties we serve across the United States, and there's 900 co-ops in the United States, we serve over 90% of the counties with persistent poverty. And if we can bring affordable rates with a much smaller carbon footprint and benefit those communities, it's a win-win-win. And so for us, it's just about being a longer dialogue about why renewables. And instead of starting with the environmental benefits, we start with the economic benefits and the community benefits. Does that help?
Thank you for that, and thank you for that question. All right, so we've got one in the back.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, and I'll be sensitive to time since I wasn't in my earlier remarks. First question or comment was about fuel reprocessing. 2 of the 4 what I would call leading technologies will focus on using reprocessed spent fuel from the existing stored facilities to produce the fuel that would be utilized in the existing reactors. We're working with the University of Wisconsin-Madison with their nuclear physics and nuclear engineering department to work on those things, up to and including fusion. So agree 100% with those thoughts and that advice. On the second question, we actually are looking at facilities, equipment that will bring carbon out of the atmosphere. The interesting thing, so there's 2 ways to look at that. You can sequester the carbon by pumping it into the ground. You can use it, or you can have mechanisms that pull carbon out of the air. Those are very energy intensive, very expensive. Carbon sequestration is there's limited feasibility based on geological formations and regional areas. The utilization of CO2 in industry is 100% useful. The economic viability of it is what we're working through. And so everything you talked about was really on the visionary end of what we're trying to do with SMRs. So agree with everything you said. Thank you for the comments.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. And now for our final question for our panel. What would you do with all the power in the industry if you had it? Start with you, Tom.
I thought maybe you cut me off there when you stole my microphone, so thanks for coming back to me. I would urge recognition that we need to be flexible. There's a couple things we didn't get a chance to talk about, but I think are important to think about it. One is, the industry really is changing rapidly, and one of the big changes that people weren't really even talking about 18 months ago or 2 years ago is data centers and the really, really large loads that we might be seeing that need really, really reliable energy, as do all of our customers. But what is that going to do to the energy transition? How are we going to meet those loads, which as utilities we're obligated to do if customers want to put those centers in our communities? And we're seeing some interest in some of the WPPI member communities already. The other piece is, Brent talked about this a little bit in his earlier presentation, but was transmission expansion, the importance of freeing up through transmission the ability to bring remote renewable generation into Wisconsin. Another huge key that is time intensive and controversial. So when we think about goals and we think about how quickly we ought to be going, I would say we need to be flexible because what we know today won't be the same as what we'll learn and know tomorrow. And the technologies available to us are highly interdependent on things like transmission, customer loads, advances in technology, reductions in cost. 2050 is still a long ways out, and I think we're going to need every minute between now and then to get to where we want to get. So flexibility.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Before I get to my answer to that question, I just think because Mike Brunig was not able to join us today, we are missing a big piece of this discussion, and that's labor. And I just want to give a shout out to some of the folks here in the room from MG&E who do the real heroes work of keeping the lights actually on in this building and across our entire service territory. I believe they are not normal human beings. Nobody really gets up in the middle of the night because they want to go, and respond to some emergency. So they are a critical part of this transition. And I just wanted to say, Nate Rasmussen is here, and he is the president of our IBEW, and just don't forget about labor in this transition. So number one. But number two, if I did have all the power, the world would be very different. But I would really maintain Wisconsin's regulatory model here. I really do think it is the best way to ensure that all customers benefit from this transition safely and reliably and affordably with proper oversight. And so I would keep that model, but I'd also really encourage quick turnaround times and help the Public Service Commission and other permitting authorities. This transition is not going to happen when every 8 Cardinal Hickory Creek takes 10 years just to get through the court system. I mean, that is just not going to happen. So I do whatever we can to enable quicker turnaround times from permitting entities. And then I really believe in focusing on our core mission. And I think that means, to me, carbon is the enemy. And if we could the only thing the utilities can do is build the generation safely and reliably and run it. We have no control over how our customers use that energy and how they reduce their own carbon footprint. So I'd say let the utilities build this generation so that you can focus as a customer on reducing your carbon footprint in other ways, whether that's electrification, food supply, food waste, increased, whatever your electrification uses are, energy efficiency, et cetera. Let us focus and do that through the regulated model.
So I would agree with Carrie Ann as far as the local at the state level. Generally, the PSC does a wonderful job, and it's good having that regulatory oversight. I'll shift gears a little bit to a national level and kind of to Brent's comments earlier about the ping pong ball that we're seeing at the EPA as the administration changes. I think that's where I would like, if I had all the power, I would disconnect the president and their administration from the control of the EPA so that we could provide some more certainty. Right now it's challenging, as all the panelists have said, of making these decisions that are going to impact us for decades to come. Yet we don't know if we change the color of the administration here in a few months, we're going to go from one extreme to the next, and it just makes it really hard for us to make decisions and put us in a good position to be successful.
Well, I'm going to be very literal that I have all the power. So this is really about it's an audacious goal, but if we look at what policymakers are driving for, it's really what we have to do. So by 2040, coal plants have to be shut down. By 2050, 80% of the fossil fuel facilities have to be replaced by nuclear power plants if we are going to meet the goals established. And in some states, Washington State and Minnesota, laws, and in Minnesota you can't bring carbon electricity across the state border. The only way there is 80% of the gas plants gone, and everything I just said, jobs are going to go away. They have to be replaced with nuclear. And that is a very challenging goal. And it's an audacious goal, but it's what's necessary to meet the requirements of, at least in Minnesota, Washington, other states that have not just goals. And I like when people talk about Wisconsin, they say, we have a goal of this. Minnesota, Washington, it's a law. And the reality is, without nuclear power plants, we are not going to get there based on 24/7 reliability. And so the challenge is the regulatory construct, the supply chain, and so it's people that have all the power, not just in our industry, but in foundries, in parts production, and the entire supply chain to get that done.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Let's give a hand to our panel. We have one final speaker to close things out today, and I'm going to let Anne-Marie introduce her. She has a personal story to share as well.
Let's do one more hand for our panelists there. Thanks for that. It's the kind of thing you can't find on Google, It's an industry discussion. So we do have a very distinguished final speaker. I do have a little personal story that'll kind of show what a small world we energy professionals live in. So State Representative Subek got her start in early childhood education. And I first met her 28 years ago because she was a pre-K teacher, and one of her students was my little daughter, Sasha, who was the most methodical, thorough, deliberate little preschooler you could have ever found. And then teacher Subek had the unenviable task of trying to go, all right, come on, the class moved on, you got to catch up without discouraging her, right? And what none of us knew at the time was that all three of us would end up in careers in energy. So I went on to work at the Public Service Commission. Teacher Subek became State Representative Subek. She is the Democratic ranking member on the Assembly Committee on Energy and Utilities. And my little thorough, deliberate Sasha grew up to be both a mechanical and electrical engineer. I did not see that coming. And in her young career, she has already worked on solar farms in Australia, the SpaceX launch facility in Texas, and last week she just got home from doing electrical work on an oil rig platform off the coast of Alaska. So I want to say thank you, Representative Subek, for your critical work in those early years. You taught my daughter so well. Thank you so much.
On the official side of things, State Representative Subek represents the 78th District of the Assembly since January of 2015. She's also on the Committee on Aging, Health, Aging, and Long-Term Care, numerous other Assembly, city, and county committees, and she's the executive board member of the Women's Legislative Network of the National Conference of State Legislatures. So here to give us closing remarks, State Representative Lisa Subek.
I can almost see you all over the podium. Hi there. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for that lovely introduction. What a crazy small world it is. And what Anne-Marie doesn't tell you is, because she may not know this, is just how well teaching preschool prepares you for working in the legislature. With no offense to my colleagues, all of those people skills, ignoring tantrums, using your words, all of those things that we teach young children are valuable skills in the state legislature as well. I want to thank all of the Customers First Coalition partners for inviting me to join you and be part of your event. I'm really happy to celebrate with you. I have to admit, I haven't listened to the podcast, but listening to all of these folks who have been on the podcast, and I'll tell you, my staff makes up for it with his multiple listens to every episode. Sam is here somewhere. I don't know where he got up and went to, but there he is. But I haven't listened not because I'm not interested, but because I'm going to go home tonight and Google, how do I get a podcast onto my computer? As Anne-Marie said, it's 28 years ago. We met when I was teaching preschool, and at that point, I was one of the most tech-savvy people I knew. And over the years, as technology has changed, and I no longer use a Sony Walkman, later a Nano iPad or my iPod Shuffle. I've sort of not kept up with that piece of technology that's our listening stuff. But I am so impressed by the caliber of the podcast, just as indicated by all of our incredible speakers here today. It's great to have so many familiar faces gathered to, I should say, I'm going to plug into that podcast. Sorry. It's great to have so many familiar faces gather here talking about energy and consumer protection issues that face our state. It is exciting to have the opportunity to learn about these issues in settings like these from such knowledgeable professionals in the field. These are complex issues, and for us as legislators, energy is one of a whole wealth of issues that we talk about. I'm on the Health Committee, the Insurance Committee, the Campaigns and Elections Committee, and Energy and Utilities. And as you can tell, while there's some interaction between those, not a whole lot. So it means that we have to know about a lot of different things. And we each come in with different backgrounds. My background was in early childhood education and then women's health policy. It wasn't in energy and utilities. I ended up on the Energy and Utilities Committee and found it fascinating and interesting and loved doing the deep dive into policy. But it's not what I came in doing, so I count on folks like you to help us understand the impact of the decisions that we make in the legislature, how they impact you, how they impact your members or your customers. As you all know, the issues that come to us on the Energy and Utilities Committee are incredibly nuanced and have far-reaching impacts. And those impacts go beyond the energy sphere. It impacts our economy, our climate, our workforce. It impacts social and environmental justice, the decisions that we make in the energy industry. And at a time when partisanship too often stands in the way of progress, one of the things that I really enjoy about energy and utilities is that so many of these issues transcend partisanship. And I'm looking at one of my former colleagues right there who is on the other side of the political aisle from me. And think about how many times when it came to energy and utilities issues, we were on the same side. Because these are issues that matter no matter where you stand, whether you're left or right or red or blue or Democrat or Republican or something in between. And relatively few of these issues are decided on party lines. Sometimes there's bipartisan support and sometimes there's bipartisan opposition, but rarely are they decided based purely on partisanship. So while we don't always agree on how to accomplish our goals, I do think it's safe to say that there is widespread agreement on a few key issues. First off, all Wisconsinites need access to affordable and reliable power, no matter who you are, where you live, or what you do. And to that end, we can all agree, although we don't always agree on the best way to regulate or how much or how little regulation, to that end, I do think we can all agree that regulating the utilities that sell electricity is fundamentally a good idea, and it has worked well here in Wisconsin overall. We are in really exciting times now as we move forward and continue the transition to cleaner energy sources. Thanks to the effort of the Biden-Harris administration and our Senator Tammy Baldwin, we are seeing historic levels of investment in our power grid through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. As these funds and tax credits flow into the state, we're already seeing new opportunities for bipartisan solutions that ensure reliability while also keeping costs low for customers. As you all know, this year we passed a bipartisan bill that paved the way to bring tens of millions of dollars in federal funding into our state to build out our electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And this is just the beginning. We have incredible opportunities ahead of us. As we work together to build a cleaner, healthier Wisconsin for future generations, please do, all of you, consider my office a partner and a resource for you. I enjoy working with each and every one of you. You have been a great help to me, and I look forward to our future work together, our continued work together to further energy and utility issues. Finally, I do want to thank everybody in the room for your commitment to delivering power affordably and reliably and to making the transition to cleaner energy sources. So I want to thank you again for inviting me to speak with you today. I want to thank Kristen for all of your fabulous work. Thank all of your partners and your sponsors. Thank you, Anne Marie. It's really nice to reconnect with you after all of this time. And I want to wish everybody a great afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Please support our work. You can subscribe to the Electric Wire podcast if you haven't already, and you can follow us on Twitter at The Electric Wire. Thanks also to the members of the Customers First Coalition for supporting this podcast. Our members are Dairyland Power Cooperative, Madison Gas and Electric, the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, WPPI Energy, the Citizens Utility Board, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 2150, and the Wisconsin Electric Cooperatives Association. Thanks again for listening. We'll have a new episode next month.